Hi guys, Dr. Luster here today, and today I want to talk to you just a little bit about what it means to be gluten-free and why it's important for us to go gluten-free for most people. Again, this is a case-by-case basis, and definitely couldn't hurt though for everyone to go gluten-free, just saying. Anyways, so gluten is actually, I kind of like to think of it as like this rubbery texture that makes bread like stick together. If you ever notice, like gluten-free bread tends to crumble more because it doesn't have some of that same gluten that holds it together. They do substitute things like xanthan gum, which kind of does the same thing and gives it that same texture, but it's really just this gummy stuff that kind of holds bread together, and that kind of sounds gross, right? But gluten is really in a lot of things. Now, gluten and wheat are actually separate things, and you can have an allergy to one but not the other. But for the most part, most people who have problems with gluten have problems with wheat as well. So I get a lot of people saying that, like, well, theoretically, like if I were in France, then, they don't have pesticides and they do, all of their stuff is organic or whatever, and so I should be able to eat it. Maybe. I'm not going to give you that one completely, but kind of. So the reason why gluten and wheat and stuff have become such an issue as of late is actually because of all of the pesticides and stuff that we've put on our food and all of the GMOs, the genetically modified foods now. So our body doesn't even super recognize it. I mean, we think, humans, we think that we can create and mimic something, and make all of the pieces the exact same as how God made it, right? How God made food or a person or a cell or whatever. And if we mimic all of that, then it will be the same thing. But the fact is that it's not. So we have these amazingly identical genetically modified organisms that we're now eating, but our body doesn't recognize them the same way. And this is significant because we think of it that, it should be able to recognize it. I mean, it looks just like it, right? But it doesn't. There's something different about it. And it's got to be on such a tiny cellular level or whatever, but your body doesn't recognize it. So what ends up happening is that those things, whether it's because of the genetically modified stuff or because of like the pesticides and stuff that are on our foods, your body doesn't digest it. So when you eat it, it literally punches holes in your gut. And those holes start becoming enough of a problem that they can eventually penetrate all the way through, and that's called leaky gut syndrome. And this ends up, once it goes all the way through, basically on the other side of your intestines is your bloodstream. And so it'll get into your bloodstream, and it's these partially digested pieces of things that aren't supposed to be in your bloodstream. And so your blood and your immune system do their job and say, what's that? That's not supposed to be here. Everybody, that's not supposed to be here. And so it tags it and marks it. And all of the troops now are looking for this thing. The problem is that sometimes those things look very similar to things that are supposed to be in the blood. Like, for example, with gluten and your thyroid. The gluten protein actually looks very, very similar to your thyroid hormone. So what ends up happening is you get this leaky gut, gluten gets out into your bloodstream, and your body is now tagging this as a foreign invader because it's just different enough to raise some flags, but not different enough to be a clear distinction to be something else. So your body goes and attacks your thyroid because it thinks it's attacking gluten. And what ends up happening is you get an autoimmune condition where your body attacks itself. This specific condition is called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I actually have this condition, and it is basically kind of manifests as your thyroid going through hyper and hypo symptoms. I like to describe it as like an engine sputtering out. Eventually it's going to go completely hypo, but it's got moments of hyper that little flare-ups of hyper as well, so you see both symptoms. Truly, a fantastic way to handle this is to try going gluten-free. And I say that, again, from experience, that when I first got this condition, I was in my early 20s and I was diagnosed with this. And they told me, I had two doctors talking to me. I had the nutritionist, nutrition doctor, the holistic doctor, who happened to be a chiropractor, and he had found it, and he was telling me, you need to try going gluten-free and healing this leaky gut. And I had talked to my medical doctor, and she told me, no, you need to get on thyroid hormone immediately. So as I'm looking at both of these, trying to weigh these options, I have the option of potentially fixing my leaky gut and calming down my thyroid and whatnot, or I have the option of being on medication for the rest of my life. And again, I was in my 20s. So I chose to not be on medication for the rest of my life and trying to heal it. And my argument to her was that if my thyroid's going to fail, then this is just postponing the inevitable. I mean, it could work, or we could just try it, and it's just, it was a couple more months or a couple of years or whatever of wasted time where I'm going to need to be on it anyways, right? So she agreed with me, and what ended up happening is my thyroid numbers stopped in their tracks, which was super cool and super impressive, and it really did end up changing my actual doctor's mind, my medical doctor. My thyroid hormones really I had other things going on, so I can't say that it fixed all of my issues, but it really stopped my thyroid hormones in their tracks from getting worse. And since then, it's been about 10 years now, my thyroid hormones have stayed stable. Again, I have other things going on, but I'm pretty strict about being gluten-free, and my thyroid hormones haven't moved, and that's pretty impressive. Now, the other thing is that once you start having this autoimmune response to things, because you have the leaky gut syndrome, it can manifest in all sorts of ways. So normally when we think about food allergies, we think about things that are causing gut problems, like diarrhea or bloating or something like that. But that's not always the case. In fact, it's only sometimes the case. It's pretty common to have other symptoms. And those other symptoms include things like rashes or insomnia, headaches / migraines. Migraines, this is a big trigger for migraines. And for me, I had migraines and I had joint pain. And I would have this excruciating joint pain that I would be out here with my hands extended and I couldn't bend them, and it would just hurt to bend anything. And there would be these just really bad flare-ups, and I couldn't figure out why. And I remember I had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and been to all sorts of rheumatologists and stuff like that. And it turns out that it was actually gluten. And it was actually these bouts of where it would attack my joints, because that's where it had started attacking. So this is fairly common. So when you're thinking about autoimmune conditions, it's not unfortunately as simple as like, oh, well, my gut's fine. So as you look at some of this, I definitely want you to consider some of that, and going gluten-free is definitely something that could help us all, because now, just the way things are processed. Unfortunately, most wheat is GMO now, and almost all of it is not organic. And even the stuff that is organic, it's hard to ensure that it didn't get contaminated. The last little piece of that I want to talk about just for a second is that this hides in so many places, so it's really difficult to eliminate exactly where it is. So ask me about that and I can give you a list. But more than that, it is important to know that it takes at least 6 months for gluten to get completely out of your system. So it's not something that you can just do for a few weeks and see results. It's going to take at least 6 months to get completely out of your system. And then we can decide. But there are a couple of ways that we can go about that. Definitely talk to me about it, because it made a huge difference in my life, and it can definitely affect yours as well. Thanks, guys.